second of Wednesday's review, because I don't have an intro for this, is The Day After Tomorrow. This was one of those movies that I can watch over and over and over again and never get sick of. I just seem to love this movie and want to come back and watch it again, and it's an enjoyment every time for me. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but it always has been for me, and I think this was about my 15th time seeing the movie. I might have even seen it more, but this is the 15th time I remember watching it anyhow. So yeah, I love this movie. It's a really good movie. Dennis Quaid is in this movie, and I like his acting. So and Jake Gyllenhaal was in this movie as well. Now I don't really know how many movies Jake Gyllenhaal had done before this. Maybe none. I'm not too sure, because this movie came out in. Now, if I could look it up, I would tell you. So I'm not really sure when it came out. I wish it. 2004. This movie came out in 2004, so it's what, 14 years old now? Holy, that seems crazy. But anyhow, this movie is about a global event. Basically, the weather is changing, and Dennis Quaid's character is a weather expert. I'm not sure what the correct term is, so I'll just go with weather expert. Anyhow, and he has this crew that is in Antarctica looking into the climate, and then all of a sudden this giant ice shelf breaks in half, the size of Rhode Island. And then he goes back and tries to explain that he thinks they're in a climate shift that could happen within the next 100 years. And then as the movie progresses, you find out that it's happening faster. So they collect the data. They have this other team that's collecting data as well that sends it over to them. And in the space station, the guys who are in the space station can see the giant supercells, I guess is what they call them for storms. And the middle of the cell is huge. I think she said 50 miles wide or something like that. So that, yeah, it's a huge storm, and there's 3 of them taking over the whole northern hemisphere of the Earth. So the only places that are safe are as far south as you can get. So Mexico was safe, South America was safe. I don't think any of Russia or Europe or any of those countries were safe. I think, yeah, because even in Japan, it completely froze, and there was hail like the size of baseballs coming down, or maybe even a little bit bigger than that. It was crazy. Even the special effects in this movie for such an old movie was nuts. So anyway, the time that Dennis Quaid's character presented for this storm to happen, he thinks they're going to go into the next ice age, and basically they almost do. Had it been any worse, had it gone farther south, the whole world would have been in an ice age, basically. Because in one scene, the military is flying. I'm not sure where they're trying to get or going to, but they're in these helicopters, and then all of a sudden it starts to freeze really quickly because they're right in the middle of the storm, and people freeze automatically because I think it was like a 135 degrees below Fahrenheit, or yeah, so negative 135. That's crazy. So that's how low the temperature was. Now I'm not sure how far it dropped by the end of the movie, but it got pretty cold, because the only way to keep yourself from freezing was to light a huge fire and keep everybody warm and in a small area so that nobody froze. So one of the most intense scenes was probably when Jake Gyllenhaal's character goes and gets medicine, because one of the girls that he was with ends up cutting her leg, and she gets blood poisoning, so they go and look for medicine on this ship, and when they're coming back, everything starts to freeze because they're right in the center of the cell in New York. So luckily he makes it out alive, and his father does come and find him, because he gets trapped in New York because this huge Jake Gyllenhaal's character gets trapped in New York because this huge wave comes through New York and wipes out everything, and then ships start coming into New York, and that's when they're in this library anyhow. So they're basically burning books to keep themselves alive, and Dennis Quaid's character says that he will come and look for him. And on their journey to come look for his son, unfortunately they lose one of their friends because they're walking on glass and the glass breaks, and he has to cut himself free so that the two of them don't die as well, so that they can go and get his son. But one of the most intense scenes was when they were on the ship and the wolves come after them, because there were these wolves in a holding pen at the beginning of the movie. And as the storm progresses, there's these giant tornadoes, yeah, right, giant tornadoes that are wiping out parts of the city as the climate slowly changes. And it rips a hole in the holding cell for the wolves, and the wolves get out. So you're not really sure when you're going to see them again, but you figure that that can't be good. At some point in time, they're going to be out and about again, right? So anyway, when they're in the library at first, they see people walking away, trying to get out of New York before it's too late. But Jake already says it is too late. His father's told him that they need to stay inside, keep warm, light fires, all that kind of stuff. Some people do stay with him. A few people stay with him. A lot of them leave the library, and unfortunately, all those people freeze to death when the supercell comes over New York and actually hits. So when Dennis Quaid's character first talks about the storm, the vice president doesn't believe him, but he actually gets to sit down in front of the actual president and talk about it later on in the movie. And if the vice president had believed him, maybe they could have evacuated the cities earlier before the storms actually hit. But unfortunately, that's not the way this movie went. But at the end of the movie, you do find out, once the helicopter comes in and takes Dennis Quaid's character and Jake Gyllenhaal and all those guys away, as they're flying out of New York, there's a whole bunch of survivors coming up to the tops of the building because the storm has finally cleared. And the guys from the space station can see that, and then the president makes an announcement saying that he's thanking the third world countries for taking them in their time of need, because they have done that for them in the past, so he's greatly appreciates that. Because unfortunately, the actual president died on his way with his motorcade to wherever he was supposed to be going. I guess Mexico is where they all ended up. So he ends up dying, getting frozen in the storm on the way there, so the vice president takes over the presidency. Now, I'm not really actually sure how that works for real, but anyway. I would say, other than that, that's really my, oh, the other team, and I'm not sure what happened to the other team that was giving them the data. I think they ended up dying as well, unfortunately, because they couldn't get out. By the time they actually did all their data on the storm, it was too late for them to make it out. So he just said to Dennis's character, save as many people as you can. That way he'd die happy. But unfortunately, all three of them had families, so you really felt for those characters, because you don't really get to see many other people in the movie that actually are like there for a long enough period of time to feel for them, I would say. Because there were two characters that got ripped away by that tornado, but I'm not really sure who they were, or I can't remember who they were, and I'm not really sure how important they were, to be completely honest, because I think they were only in the movie for that scene. I know they were weather experts, but I'm not really sure how that worked. But one of the weather experts actually gets a bus crushed on his Porsche, and one of the news reporters gets taken out by a sign during the tornadoes. So there were cool scenes in this movie. The graphics were good for a 2004 movie, and still are still good to this day. That I think this movie kind of stands. I mean, some of it could have been done better, but I mean, you got to remember this movie's 14 years old, so at the time this looked incredibly real, and it still looks fairly real, as opposed to even some movies today, like I've said with other movies. So that's where I will leave off this review. If you like this review, or as always, like, comment, subscribe. Sorry, the sun's just beaming down through that window, and I don't have anything to really block it right now. As always, link to my Instagram account below. Leave your rating of the movie, leave your thoughts on the movie. I would give this movie a 6 out of 5 as far as Storm movies go. I would say this one outdoes itself just based on this was probably the best standalone Storm movie because I've seen other ones and they're like B-rated. This one's definitely worth the watch if you haven't seen it yet, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed. You'll want to go back and watch it again like me. So that's where I will leave off this review, and I will see you guys again tomorrow, or I guess Thursday, because today's only Monday. So I'll see you guys tomorrow with a review of the Walking Dead book, because I'm going to finish that, and then I'm currently watching the first of Thursday's reviews right now, which is Robots. So I'll see you guys on Thursday with a review of Robots, and then Horton Hears a Hoot is also going to be on Thursday. And I guess Robots is on Friday, right? And The Happening will be on Friday as well. So bye-bye for now.